just walking up and down the street. It's a really, really busy street with lots of cars coming by, but you can imagine about 100 years ago, if this was all one piece of land and just a simple one-bedroom house. Down here away is a one-bedroom house and a chicken coop. I think this house here has some chickens, so it's kind of eerie just walking by and I can hear the chickens. There's a rooster cawing right now, but hearing that and hearing screaming boys at night, it's just an eerie thing to think about 100 years ago. Out in the middle of the desert, as they called it back then, but now it's heavily populated Riverside County. Welcome to As Seen by Dave. Right now, I'm standing near the location of a former chicken ranch here in Horrifying Valley, which used to be known as Mira Loma, and previous to that, Wineville. And I want to be upfront with you. This story is disturbing and it's incredibly sad. So if you're up for it, well, let's dive right in. Oh, you can hear a chicken right now. If you didn't know the history of this area, you'd never think twice about passing through. It looks like an ordinary suburban neighborhood in Southern California. But nearly 100 years ago, this place was tied to a case involving kidnapping, SA, and murder. A case that would become one of the most infamous true crime stories in California history. The name at the center of the story is Gordon Stewart Northcott, otherwise known as Stewart, as his parents called him. He was born in November 1906 in Canada and moved to California with his parents in 1924. His childhood was different. His mother and father had lost a 6-year-old son, and Stewart was a surprise, but not exactly one that they wanted. At first, his mother tried everything she could to lose her baby prior to his birth. She found a way to love him, but not just love him. But she thought that he could do no wrong, as we will find out in a little bit later in the story. From an early age, he was described as an odd child, bullied, isolated, and socially withdrawn. As he got older, his behavior became deeply troubling. One of the earliest known warning signs include SA of a younger boy believed to be his first known victim. He was a younger brother of a supposed friend. This was just the beginning. In the 1920s, Gordon eventually convinced his parents to buy him 3 acres of land in what was then known as Wineville here in Riverside County. As you can see, it's really developed. He claimed he wanted to become a farmer, but Gordon wasn't interested in physical labor, so he went back to Canada and found someone else to do all his dirty work. Stewart asked his sister if one of her sons could come to California to help on the ranch. She had 2 boys, 11 and 13. Stewart chose the 13-year-old, Sanford Clark. He felt an attraction to him. He promised baseball games and sightseeing on the drive back. Instead, he drove through. Once at the ranch, Sanford was forced into exhausting labor. If he didn't comply, he was beaten, whatever Stewart had nearby. Sanford later described being subjected to SA multiple times a week, along with constant physical punishment. He considered running, but feared being returned by authorities, and punished even worse. One night, he tried to flee. Later that night, while Sanford was sleeping, Stewart punished him by pouring boiling hot water onto his back and locking him away in a wooden box for days. Sanford had learned how to survive his uncle, not by escaping, but by minimizing the harm. A very brutal reality for a 13-year-old young boy. Sanford soon noticed other boys being brought to the ranch, often Mexican boys who didn't speak English. At night, he heard screams coming from the chicken coop. The screams would go on for weeks and then stop. Gordon lured boys with candy, rides, or promises of fun. Some were released. Others were kept, and then they were murdered. The first suspected murder was known as the Headless Mexican. Its only a body was discovered on the side of the road. The head, according to Stewart's nephew, Sanford, was brought back to the chicken farm and disposed of. Among some of the other victims were Lewis, a 12-year-old boy, and Nelson, his brother, a 10-year-old, the sons of Nelson Winslow Sr. and his wife. The boys were abducted on May 16, 1928 in Pomona, California, while walking home from a yacht club meeting. They never made it home. Northcott would write letters home to the parents and pretend to be the boys. This way the parents thought that they were safe and sound. In August 1928, Sanford's older sister, Jessie, visited him at the ranch. She noticed that Sanford's writing wasn't changing, even though he should be 2 years advanced in school. But since he wasn't going to school, she noticed something was off. Sanford told her he feared for his life and that Stewart had killed multiple boys here at the ranch. Jessie returned to Canada and reported everything to the authorities. So when investigators approached the ranch, Stewart saw them coming and ran into the tree line, threatening Sanford to stall them. For nearly 2 hours, Sanford stalled. Then he made a choice that likely saved his life. He told the agents the truth. Gordon and his mother fled to Canada but were arrested on September 19, 1928. Sanford led authorities to shallow graves on the ranch. They uncovered partial human remains, enough to confirm Sanford's testimony. Sanford also described another victim killed elsewhere, whose remains were destroyed. The evidence confirmed the horror. So Sanford Clark was not tried for murder. Prosecutors recognized him as a victim, someone acting under fear. He later served in the military, worked for decades, adopted 2 sons, and lived a quiet life. He ended up passing away in 1991. His son stated that he lived with the abuse and the guilt of all he had been forced to do for the rest of his life. So here is the street that you can see now. This is Wineville, here in what is now known as Horrifying Valley. But it was, like I said, it was Wineville. They changed the name to Mira Loma, and then a couple years ago they changed this whole area. They combined a couple different cities in the Horrifying Valley. So there's all new homes over here. There's a new shopping center, and then the 15 freeway. So I don't know exactly what 3 acres Gordon Stewart Northcott owned, but straight ahead here where you see this fence and this car here, this is 6330, which was his former address. I'm assuming all this was his land. You can't see much because of the trees. Obviously, these owners have probably hidden a lot of the history here for a good reason. But somewhere back there is, I heard that the original house still stands. I couldn't see it, but there is the original house, a 1-bedroom house that was owned. Crazy to me is a couple doors down is a Montessori preschool. It's just kind of eerie to me that there is a preschool a couple doors down here. Because you imagine this, all this land was his at one point, and this is where all these atrocities were committed. Now this is the former chicken ranch. Can't see much, so we can get a little higher here. See what we can see. All right. These trees really do cover a lot. And I did try driving behind. You can't see anything because there's a whole street and more homes behind it. So you can't get any closer. Now in 2008, there was an Angelina Jolie movie directed by Clint Eastwood released called Changeling. This movie told the story of a young boy missing and being returned to his mother, but the return boy wasn't the correct boy. This is tied to the chicken ranch. 9-year-old Walter Collins disappeared on March 10th, 1928 after leaving home to go to the movies in the Los Angeles area. The case gained national attention. 5 months later, a boy claiming to be Walter was found in Illinois. Walter's mother, Christine Collins, immediately said the boy was not her son upon his arrival. Instead of listening, police pressured her to take the boy home and later had her committed under Code 12. The LAPD told her to test out the child. That he was indeed her son Walter. Christine was locked up for 10 days in a psych ward. The boy eventually admitted he was Arthur Hutchins Jr., a runaway who impersonated Walter to get to Hollywood. Christine Collins sued and won, but never received the money she was awarded, as the officer that committed her claimed he had no money. Gordon Stewart Northcott was convicted of kidnapping and murdering young boys connected to the ranch. He admitted to killing at least 20 murders on the chicken ranch, but would often recount his testimony and change his story, possibly just to confuse or anger families or to help his case. The murder shocked the nation, but for one father, shock turned into fury. Nelson Winslow Sr., devastated and enraged, led a lynch mob to the Riverside County Jail where Stewart was being temporarily held. The mob intended to hang him after the trial, but before sentencing. They wanted justice on their own terms. Police were able to convince the mob to disband, but the anger surrounding his case would never fully disappear. Stewart was sent to San Quentin Prison, California's oldest prison and the place where executions were carried out at the time. While on death row, Stewart Northcott continued to manipulate the truth, confessing, recanting, and contradicting himself, especially when it came to Walter Collins. He gave Christine Collins hope, and then he took it away. On October 2nd, 1930, Gordon Stewart Northcott was led to the gallows at San Quentin. He was hanged, but the execution did not happen quickly. Witnesses reported that it took approximately 13 minutes for Northcott to die. 13 minutes. No final confession, no truth revealed, just silence and unanswered questions. For Christine Collins, even his death brought no closure, because Northcott never gave her the one thing she wanted most, the truth about her son. Christine spent the rest of her life searching for answers. She died in 1964, still holding on to hope that her son Walter was still out there somewhere. Now, I will say a really disturbing piece of this story is Stewart's mom also committed some of these crimes. So Stewart's nephew, Sanford, he didn't talk a lot about what had happened, but during his testimony and later on, I believe one or both of his sons were involved of the retelling of their dad's story. Sanford stated that his uncle, Stewart, and his grandmother, Sarah Louise, I believe her name was, Sarah Louise Northcott, that she came to visit a couple times at the chicken ranch. She knew what was going on here, and that there was, so Sanford claims that Walter Collins was murdered here on the chicken ranch, and that it was his grandmother's idea to get the nephew involved, Sanford, involved in the murdering of Walter Collins. This way he wouldn't testify against them. He would be a part of the murder. Now, what Sanford said is that his grandmother had come here to the ranch because the grandmother and grandfather, who were Stewart's parents, lived in Los Angeles, so they would come out here to visit him. But the grandmother came out here, Stewart's mother, came out here, and one night Walter was locked up in the chicken coop, and she grabbed an axe and she started hitting him over the head. She started hitting Walter over the head. and then it was Sanford's turn, and eventually it was Stewart's turn. So his mother, Stewart's mother, was also tried. She was found guilty and served life. She later did get out of prison, and then she went back east to Pennsylvania and lived with her husband the last few years of her life. I believe she died in the late 40s or 50s, 1950s, 1940s. Now, Sanford was happy when his grandma first came out because he was like, great, somebody finally to help get me out of this and get me out of the abuse. But she knew what her son was doing, and she actually helped. Not sure how many victims she helped with, but she, according to Sanford, the grandson and the nephew, Walter Collins, was one of the victims that his grandmother participated in, and she was given life in prison. Now, Gordon Stewart Northcott was 23 years old when he passed away, when he was hanged at the gallows there in San Quentin. So he did these crimes in between 1926 and 1928, they believe. Now, these were just the murders here, the chicken ranch, because that's where he lived here for those 2 years. So he claims 20 murders, but it's often been refuted and taken back because he never really told the whole truth. But 20 murders in the 1920s were probably... So 20 victims were probably murdered here in Wineville, what was formerly known as Wineville, now Horrifying Valley, here in the Riverside County. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I hope you guys have liked this video. I know it's a sad, sad story, but one I've been wanting to tell for a while. I remember watching the movie Changeling and just thinking how crazy it was that the police gave the wrong child to the mother and had the mother committed because they didn't, and they had the mother committed saying that this was her right child, that she was crazy. But it sounds like, back then the LAPD was pretty corrupt. I'm not going to go out there and say that they aren't corrupt. I mean, I know, as we all know, not everyone in their occupation is great at their job. But back then, leading into the 40s, 50s, LAPD was known for the corruption. And it sounded like these police officers really didn't care what happened. They really probably just wanted to close this case, which oftentimes that still happens these days. But rest in peace to these young boys, and that poor 13-year-old boy, Sanford, what he had to endure here of abuse, and meeting some of these young boys who were eventually murdered. And he helped bury some of these kids. So rest in peace to all the victims, the abuse victims, the murdered victims. Until next time, rest in peace to a lot of these victims. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing to As Seen by Dave here on YouTube, Facebook. I have an Instagram, and I have TikTok. Until next time, As Seen by Dave, out.